it'll all change.
Yep,
Right.
amen.
Can you tell where I'm going?
Yep.
So,
Yes.
my transportation at this most beautiful place, it's probably one of the most beautiful shorelines outside of Emerald Bay. Zephyr Point, it looks across the Mount Talak.
Yep,
I sit on the dock in the presence of God every night, taking pictures of sunsets, looking at water, watching bald eagles fly over.
amen.
It's not rough.
No,
They gave me a cabin, they gave me a place to park my RV. And so one day I was having to make a run back up to the shop from the bottom of the hill. And this big explosion hit me. It bounced my golf cart about this high off the ground. It rocked it like that. People from the shop at the top of the hill all came down because they heard the explosion. The people in the kitchen all came out because they thought there was an explosion or gunfire. And I'm stunned, and my right ear is deaf and bleeding.
Wow.
They go all around the golf cart, all the mechanics. Maybe it was a battery, so let's see, check the battery, to check everything. I said, well, I'm out. I headed back to Sacramento to emergency. The emergency room physician looked into my ear and she says, you have a perforated eardrum. And you're going to require reconstructive surgery. We can probably do it in about a week. I said, no, I got to be in Fort Worth, Texas for a board meeting on Saturday. This was Wednesday. 3 days later, and the physician says, you don't fly. You will be crying with the babies. I said, I got to fly. I have to be there. So I show up on Friday, get my hotel, and the president of our organization calls me and says, hey, you know, Kenneth Copeland's in town with the Southwest Believers conference or convention. But he says in the morning at 10 o'clock, he starts the healing school. But at 12 o'clock, we've got our board meeting.
So you did fly anyway?
I flew anyway. Yeah. I'll go to China.
yep. What's the
It's a
doctor
big deal.
for?
So, where was I?
Kenneth Cole?
Oh,
No.
and I grew up in a denomination that did not like him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is a man of God.
Absolutely.
He is a prophet of God.
Oh, yeah.
He's all dressed up to the nines, suit and tie.
Oh,
He walks right up to the pulpit and he said, somebody here has a busted eardrum and you are being healed right now.
Yay. Praise God.
yep.
We did the board meeting, got back on the plane, flew back to Sacramento. A couple days later, the physician called me, said, hey, I'd like to set you up for reconstructive surgery. And I'd like you to come in for a post-op thing and check you out. And I said, well, I got healed. And the physician said, praise the Lord.
Nice.
So, what was this explosion? So I have a great prophetess friend from San Diego. She was high levels of witchcraft, very high levels of witchcraft, and she got radically saved. But she still has discernment about the operations of witchcraft. She still knows what they're up to. So she called me right away and she goes, that explosion was a witch's coven in South Lake Tahoe trying to destroy you. But God protected you.
Amen.
So I told the Lord, if I only have to suffer for 3 days for you, and then you heal me, big deal. So the spirit of witchcraft, I asked Malvina, I said, how do they know I'm here? I'm not up here working in the woods. She goes, they know. You're here, and they know why you're here. So when the salt went into the water,
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
secondly, part of the clash is the spirit of religion that rests upon a people. There was a big conference going on of 300 leaders, and the property said, hey, make your way around, show them the property, tell them what you do. So this executive president of a big conference center, he heard what I was doing. He came to approach me about me doing business for them, overseeing projects. So breakfast started at 8 o'clock. The lady from the organization that was supposed to lead in prayer before you eat showed up a half hour, 45 minutes late. Everybody's already eating and almost done. Well, this executive director is talking to me about his property, and we're just this far apart with his assistant. And this 33-year parish priest, he was a parish priest for 33 years, came up and drugged me out of the conversation. Physically drugged me away from this conversation.
Wow.
Good.
So I went and told a couple of the directors what had happened. I didn't want this guy to be able to hide out, and it was in front of 300 people. So I wasn't embarrassed, but I went back to my RV that evening, and he decided to come up and confront me up there. And out of his religious arrogance, I said, "Don't you dare touch me again."
Amen.
I warned him. And off he walked, man. Then I decided I was going to sleep in my cabin just to get away from this guy.
Amen.
And the next morning, I've got a rap on my door from the Douglas County Sheriff Department. And they said, "We want to know the story." I told them the story. I said, "I have 300 witnesses." They said, "The state of Nevada does not take assault and battery very highly. Are you ready to press charges?" So I just said, we're supposed to be Christians up here, and I think we can work it out. But if he touches me again, I'm pressing charges. So we have the spirit of religion. And see, when you start taking your rightful place in the earth,
Right.
and when you're living from heaven,
Amen.
the enemy is going to try to do everything he can
Everything.
to get you to quit.
Oh, yeah.
5 years ago, I was ministering, I was leasing casino conference rooms in Reno, and we were just doing these wild glory meetings. People were getting touched and delivered, set free. It was very, very powerful. And then a whole group of denominational pastors came and tried to run me out, but they did run me out. They said I didn't have a covering, that I was taking their sheep. So under that kind of pressure, because I grew up in a denomination, and you live to get men of God approval.
Yeah.
You live to get the approval of the denomination. You live to get the approval of the congregation.
Yeah.
Well, I don't live like that anymore.
Praise God.
It's a good thing.
If nobody approves
Won't do it.
of what God's called me to do, it doesn't matter anymore.
No.
Yep.
I've died to myself.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
So I want to talk to you just shortly about the clash and the shift. Whenever we are working from heaven, we're there to bring a shift
Yeah.
on earth.
Amen.
There is a distance between heaven and earth that carries with it a resistance to our progress.
Yeah.
Until you die to yourself, until you are separated for the glory of God,
Yeah.
and you do not need the applause of men,
Amen.
you walk in power.
Yeah.
You walk in humility, but you walk in power before the Lord.
Amen.
So I believe this is the day of the spirit of Esther.
Mhm.
And I believe this is the day of the spirit of Elijah.
Yeah.
Praise God.
I think one of the most heroic and brave, courageous acts of faith I've ever seen in the Bible is when Esther was warned that if she keeps going through with this operation to set her people free,
Yeah.
that it would cost her her life.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then she says the famous words, "If I die, I die." When the authority of heaven, when the power of heaven, when the revelation of heaven rests upon your body and you've died to yourself and you're living unto God,
Amen.
Come on.
Amen.
that's when witchcraft gets nervous.
Yeah.
Because you're dead to yourself
Yeah.
and you're full of the power of God.
You can't do it.
I went to do a sales call at one of the head New Agers in El Dorado County. I mean, she's traveled with the Dalai Lama and all this other stuff. And I went to her door for the sales call, and she said to me, "Where'd you get all that light?
Yeah.
It's intense."
Yeah.
And I didn't have the maturity to answer her, you know.
Mhm.
But I had knowledge that I carried light. A young disciple friend of mine was working at the theater. Not the theater, he's working in the mall, at the arcade. And he's just studying the Bible like crazy. He was totally delivered from drugs, everything. He was a rascal. And so he calls me up and he said, "I got a problem." I said, "Okay, I'll help. What do you need?" He goes, "Well, there's this young guy that comes from the UA Cinema, and he comes in to play arcade on his break, and he goes and tells me that he's in witchcraft, that he's a wizard. And I don't know what to do with wizards." I said, "Schedule coffee, I'll come and meet him. We'll meet together."
Yeah.
Discipleship. So this guy shows up, and he's a little unnerving, but a nice kid. And I'm kind of wondering about the EBGBs on this guy, being in witchcraft, you know.
Right.
So we meet, we talk, I talk about the Lord and all that. He goes, "Yeah, okay, whatever," and then he walks away. So this went on for about 3 weeks, once a week. What I did not know is that he was going down to the American River to do incantations to create a force field around about him so that I couldn't hurt him.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So, out of this situation, in one of these meetings in the coffee shop, he came to Christ.
Yep.
I said, "Why did you come to Christ?" He said, "Because the power in you was greater than the power on me."
Amen.
Praise God.
So, I took him home. And I remember in the hallway, the bathroom door is cracked open a little bit in there. He's cleaning up and stuff for the evening. And he was doing this to his face. And all I could hear him saying is, I'm changing.
Yep.
I'm changing.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jesus.
I'm changing.
Yep.
So then there's the clash and the shift that comes from the spirit and the power of Elijah.
Come
I kind of like how it was written. The spirit and the power
Yeah.
of Elijah. And we all know the story. So one time I was asking the Lord, what about this spirit and power? Because the word tells us that in this certain day and epoch that we live in,
Yes.
that the spirit of Elijah is coming back.
Yep.
Wouldn't you want to know?
Sure.
Okay. So, the Lord is going to release the spirit and the power of Elijah, and he's doing it right now. That's actually what's resting on the earth in an unprecedented way, and it is an exciting time
Amen.
to partner with the spirit of Elijah. This, I'm just trying to find my note here. I'm going to just come right into a sentence that I wrote. It says, for the subject and ministry. This will lay a foundation for the subject and ministry. Address the history of those who have ministered and anointed in this realm.
Right.
It'll bring new insight into the ministries
Yep.
of how Elijah operated, how John the Baptist operated. It'll release a greater understanding of the spirit and power of Elijah, and an understanding of those who will be operating in it.
Amen.
It is also the Lord's will for his people to understand the spirit and the power of Elijah, so they will partner with it instead of resisting it.
Amen. Amen.
See, true kingdom believers that are finding themselves waiting and resting in the glory of the Lord, they're being transformed
Amen.
into another image, into another species.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not really a conversion, it's a transformation.
Amen.
And it isn't just about being born again, it's that we are being born from above.
Transfigured.
We're being transfigured. And this is what it says. It says, behold, I send you Elijah the prophet.
Yep.
And before the coming of the great and dreadful day, okay?
Yep.
Before the great and dreadful day, the day of the Lord, he owns it. He owns that day.
What scripture is that, Mike?
This is Malachi 4,
Yep.
verses 5 through 6. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers
Right.
to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. You hear the language? So, this morning at 6 a.m. on the steps of City Hall, I might as well go to the place of government
Might as well.
on the horizontal level. While I was in the Spirit and we're interceding, the Holy Spirit showed me droves of uncertain people who had uncertainties,
Yep.
because they didn't know if they could die tomorrow.
Well,
And they were running into the people of God.
Yep.
They were running into the churches
Yep.
because of the uncertainty.
Right.
Yeah.
Where the spirit of fear,
Right.
Uh-huh.
it's a pandemic of fear.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what it is. It's a pandemic of fear.
Yep.
I heard one brain scientist say, she said that it's around 90%, 95% of all diseases in the body start in the mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do. Yep.
So
As a man thinketh, so
I was remodeling the kitchen, a bathroom. And the couple said, hey, by the way, my sister lives here, she's disabled. And so we were having a chat. And I said, so what's your disability? And she says, well, I have three things. I have 3 disabilities. I said, I've been looking into getting some disability insurance for my son who has seizures. And I said, well, how did you get yours? Because it's a long process. You actually get turned down 3 times, minimum. You get turned down 3 times for disability insurance.
yeah.
I said, how did you get yours? She said, I lied about the 3 diseases. I lied about the 3 diseases
Wow.
to get her government insurance money. And then I said, well, what's going on with your body? If you lied about your diseases, what's going on with your body? She said, I got all 3 diseases.
Yeah, you confessed.
She opened herself up.
Right, yep.
Wow.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Give what you
Was
said.
she a Christian or no?
No.
I see people that don't think they're Christian.
So, my second meeting today, after we prayed and we were there just to, cause the friction in the demonic world.
Amen.
And then Glenn Bertot's wife, Deborah, invited me to a 9:30 meeting
Yeah.
that she called random.
I was should be.
She called the meeting random. I called the morning meeting random.
That's right. Yeah. It is.
I think I know why. Because of witchcraft.
Yeah.
You get in and get the job done.
Yeah.
If you go to Uganda and you hang a banner in the city square talking about a revival meeting
Right.
on the street corner on Thursday at 6 p.m., all you're doing is you're gathering the witches.
Yeah. Right.
That's why even in my little Facebook thing, I just called it Shift Modesto.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 Sometimes you gotta fake
How
them
was
out.
the turnout? Great?
It was awesome.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
It was very powerful. We sat in the dark on a picnic bench
Awesome.
and went around the room and were prophesying. And then Deborah said, I wish I could have been there, but my husband needs all this rest.
Yes.
And I just bought a new puppy. And I didn't want to leave and have the puppy waking him up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To sit in a room with the wife who watched her husband resurrect from the dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
She did.
And then we also prayed and interceded over Rick Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go see him.
Verna goes in and sits at his bedside
Yeah.
and just reads the word and they worship.
Yeah. Plays
Yeah.
music.
She got up to his ear and said, honey, yawn.
Yeah. Yeah. She did.
And he yawned.
Yeah. She did.
During some of the worship music, his feet were moving.
Yeah. They did.
Oh, praise God.
Most people would see that and say, no, he's a goner.
Yeah.
But Verna saw that by faith and go, uh-oh, look what's going on here.
Yeah.
Glenn Bertot,
Yeah.
you got to hear his story if you haven't.
All the way.
I mean, he had very powerful people
Yeah.
with authority
Yeah.
praying him out of death's door.
Amen. Amen.
Yes.
That's why when I made the call for prophets, pastors, anything to come down on the city steps,
Yeah.
I knew I didn't need 100 people,
Right.
100 religious people.
No.
Praise God. Yeah.
And I noticed 2 witches walking around, but it was almost like they were drugged.
Yeah.
They're in a stupor.
They
So
can
cool.
see it. There's nothing they can see.
Think so ineffective.
When I was a kid, I was wild.
It's a spirit.
I used to go to these, what do they call them? It's a whole convention all about witchcraft.
Yeah.
Huh.
Con,
Psychic.
something con. Anyway,
Are you talking about the Comic-Con?
kind of like that, but it had to do with witchcraft, and so
Wow.
I was just dumb enough to go stand at the front gate and challenge him. So all of a sudden, this guy, this tall, his face is painted white, his hair is this,
Crazy.
like Kiss, the Kiss
Yeah.
band.
Oh, wow.
He's headed toward me.
Mhm.
And he's got this staff,
Yeah.
and I just stood there. And he couldn't come any closer.
Yeah.
And then he turned around and walked back into his convention. See, we have power of the enemy.
Yeah, we do. Yes.
And when you die to yourself and live unto Christ, the devil can't touch you.
Amen.
He might bruise you. You might stub your toe.
Yeah.
You might get your ear blown out. Get it back 3 days later. So, this hysteria in the earth, and Kim and I were talking about it a little bit, is that China has a history of slaughtering believers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And the church, under dictators, has grown like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And when the Chinese believer comes to Christ, they know there's a death threat against them.
Yeah.
But they accept Christ anyway, under a dictator. In Pakistan, one of the largest movements, one of the largest revivals in the world, are women in Pakistan who live under a dictator. Who live under a dictator. It's a powerful move of God.
Amen.
So could it be, and I'm not prophesying this or not, but could it be where this virus, and I heard the virus actually got out of the scientists' hands and spread, they were messing with it,
Yeah.
and it got away?
Yeah.
And who did it affect first?
China.
China.
Yep.
It's affected their economy. It's affected their lifestyle.
Yep.
It's affected the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're powerful people.
Yes, we are.
And it's the glory realm that brings the transformation to us.
Yep.
It brings the love of God to us.
Amen.
It's intimate. Where I started making my exodus from church life is I got kicked out of my family's church because I was prophetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would lean over to the pastor and say, a handful of people are getting healed of cancer in a minute. He'd hand me the microphone, I go up, and a bunch of people come down and get healed of cancer.
Yeah.
And then that week, the board pulled me in there to reprimand me and put me on probation,
Mhm.
that I did not have the proper credentials.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Happens
No, they
all
didn't-
the time.
they didn't- They didn't help you.
Yeah.
Protocol stuff.
When I got ordained to ministry with Rod Parsley,
Amen. Amen.
when I flew into Ohio,
Mhm.
the landing gear wouldn't come down.
Mhm.
And we're not trafficking because there's a lot of airplanes. We're trafficking because we can't land.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm just praying, and I'm looking at my clock. I'm going to miss this ordination. So finally, because I was sitting right above the wheels, and finally I could hear it go, boom. You could hear the airline, the gas lines or whatever they are. The pneumatics. We landed. I grabbed the cabbie guy. I said, here's $100, go fast. Because I gotta make this thing. 10,000 in attendance. Down in the front, we're about 300 getting ready to go up onto the stage, and then they would do the laying on of hands.
Yeah.
I'm in the back hallway with my luggage. You know, like, you know, and this lady walks right up to me, says, "Are you Mike Tate?" I go, "Yes, come with me. We're gonna drop your luggage in the office, and then I want you to stand by this door, and when they get ready to talk about the ordination process, I want you to go right down the aisleway, and you see that opening, you go stand right there." So, it happened. I make my way down there. I get up there, and then Rod Parsley started talking a little bit more, and hadn't released all the new ministers yet. And then the usher goes, so I'm going up this back hallway up to the major stage, and then I'm realizing, oh my God, I'm the first one. I'm gonna be the first one ordained.
Praise God.
So they introduced us from the stage, and we go down into the altar area. He got all this ministry team, and he came down the line. I had my eyes closed like this. I was like, oh yeah. They're praying in the spirit, and it felt like a freight train coming.
Yep.
I didn't even want to look. No, I'm going down. And when Rod Parsley laid hands on me, it took me out, man, just bam. So I realized that I didn't get checked into my hotel because I got there late.
Yep.
And then I realized the people that were paying for my hotel gave them a bad credit card.
Oh no.
So I had a nice hotel in Ohio. I had a really nice hotel, all paid for, that wasn't paid for. And there were so many ministers in town, there was no more hotel space. And these two ladies from Pennsylvania drove me all the way across town to the outskirts in a trucker's hotel. And I got up there and the guy said, we only got one room left. Like, okay.
That's all I need.
Well, I get in the room, this hotel room just looked immaculate, but it smelled like there's a cigarette smoker somewhere in the room. I mean, I was looking back in the bathroom. Where's the smoker? It was that thick. So I grabbed a wet cloth, put it over my nose.